Hello, my name is Nick Deborah, and I'm an independent educator and author in the fields of data visualization and dashboard design. And in this short video, I want to talk about 3 ways to avoid diagonal or vertical text in charts, because actually the vast majority of the time, this can be avoided. And obviously, the reason to do this is because if in a chart like this, you can see that it's just a little bit hard to read, right? Somewhere in your brain, it's got to kind of do this. And so generally you want to try and avoid, vertical or even diagonal text. Maybe a little bit better if you make it diagonal, but still not ideal. And so in a situation like this, where the reason why we had this non-horizontal text in the first place was because we had very long labels. If you haven't thought of it already, there's a very simple solution, right? Most of the time, we can just take the whole chart and rotate it 90 degrees, and then we have lots of room, even if the labels are very long. And of course, they're horizontal, making them easier to read. Like I just said, you can usually do this, but not always, because, for example, if your labels are time, it doesn't really work very well, right? Our brains just don't compute scales like time if they're rotated 90 degrees like this. And so, but what happens though if we do have a chart like this where we have a time scale and our software has made the labels vertical so that they kind of fit underneath the chart? Again, not ideal, because somewhere in our brain it's sort of doing this, right? There's actually a common solution, but oftentimes people don't really think of it, which is called a multi-level time scale. And so you basically just split up the time, in this case days over months, into 2 rows, and then everything is horizontal. And in fact, generally this is just an easier format of time scale to read anyways. And this works with pretty much any periods of time. Here I have days over months, but you can have months over years or seconds over minutes. It's going to work the same way. Another common reason why we'll find vertical text in charts is, of course, the y-axis is often made vertical. It's the default in virtually every software product. But again, not ideal. Somewhere in our brain, we're doing this. And again, there's actually quite a simple solution that doesn't occur to a lot of people, which is just to put the y-axis label up here. Now, notice that I did format it a little differently. This is something I've been doing relatively recently. I put the axis label in parentheses, and I also made it italics, because otherwise you end up with something at the top of the chart, which in this case looks like $6,000 average donations raised per shift, as if that's a value in the chart, which it's not. And so just that little formatting tweak specifies that that is actually the name of the axis. It's not an actual value in the chart. And so, like I said, the vast majority of the time, using one of these 3 tricks, I can actually get away with not having vertical or diagonal text in my chart, but not always. Sometimes there are situations like this where it's basically kind of unavoidable, right? Can't really do much about this. But these are relatively rare, right? In this case, there is no way to make all of my text horizontal. It's not the end of the world. Like I said, I just gave you a couple of ways to avoid doing this. And so if you ever find yourself making a chart and you've ended up with diagonal or vertical text in your chart, try rotating the chart 90 degrees, or switching to a multi-level time scale, or repositioning the y-axis, as I showed you in those previous examples. These, by the way, are just a few tips from my Practical Charts course, and it's easy to take that. There are 3 ways. I now have an on-demand version of the course, and there's a discount code there if you want to take that. I also deliver a couple of public workshops per year, and the next one is actually coming up. If you happen to be in Central Europe, I'll be delivering it live and in person in Amsterdam at the end of October, and then my Practical Dashboards course in the middle of November. But most of the workshops that I deliver are private workshops for employees of a single organization. And so if this course might be useful to your team, then by all means do reach out. Thanks very much for listening.